Sam Jordan has always taken pride in his independent, country lifestyle. A lifelong poultry farmer and a former military man with a heart as big as the sprawling land he tends, Sam's Jordan Acres isn't just a farm. It's a legacy. The property is a patchwork of flourishing gardens, open fields, and a quaint red barn that has seen family reunions, harvest festivals, and quiet afternoons spent by the pond. Yet, the true soul of Jordan Acres is Sam's prized flock of chickens. Raised with care and respect for natural organic living, these chickens not only supply him with fresh eggs, but also represent a deep connection to the past, a connection Sam is determined to protect. Living on the outskirts of a suburban neighborhood that's increasingly dominated by cookie-cutter aesthetics, Sam's way of life has often clashed with the community's rigid standards. At the center of that rigidity is Kerren, the self-appointed queen of the local homeowners association HOA. With her signature power suits, meticulously coiffed hair, and a clipboard that seems inseparable from her hand, Kerren patrols the neighborhood with an air of self-importance. Her mission? To enforce a homogenized vision of perfection, even if that means trampling on the individual quirks that make properties like Jordan Acres unique. The spark came one bright morning when Sam stepped outside to check on his chickens and discovered chaos. The secure chicken coop had been left wide open, and his flock was nowhere to be found. After frantic calls to his neighbors, he soon learned the unthinkable. Kerren had liberated his chickens. According to her, the flock's noisy clucking and roaming had disrupted the community's peace and violated some obscure HOA regulation. To Kerren, free range was a code word for disorder. Fuming, Sam confronted Kerren later that day near the community center. "Kerren, how could you just free my chickens from my coop?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger. "These chickens are my livelihood and part of my family's legacy. I never authorized you to interfere in my property." Kerren's response was icy and patronizing. "Sam, the rules apply to everyone. Your animals create unnecessary noise and disorder. It's for the good of the community if they're set free, so everyone can see what proper management looks like." Her tone brooked no argument, and with a dismissive wave of her hand, she turned and walked away. That confrontation left Sam reeling. His chickens, symbols of his hard work and independence, had been turned loose by an overzealous enforcer of conformity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Sam stood alone by the empty coop, the quiet clucking now replaced by an eerie silence. He knew then that Kerren's interference was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger campaign to impose her sterile, uniform standards on every resident. Determined to protect his property and preserve the freedom that Jordan Acres represented, Sam vowed that he would fight back. The battle for his legacy was about to begin. The very next morning, Sam awoke to find another unwelcome surprise: an official notice taped to his farmhouse door. The document, embossed with the HOA's crest and signed by Kerren herself, accused him of violating community noise and animal control regulations by allowing his chickens to roam freely. The notice demanded that he immediately secure his coop or face a fine of $750. Its language was stern, laced with legalese designed to leave no room for misunderstanding, a clear message that Kerren was determined to set an example. Sam's pulse raced as he read the notice. His chickens, far from being a nuisance, were an integral part of his sustainable organic lifestyle and had been raised with care for generations. With determination, he gathered copies of local ordinances and property rights documents that clearly affirmed his legal authority over his farm operations. Confident that the fine was baseless, Sam drafted a formal complaint disputing the charge and detailing his rights as a property owner. As the morning mist lifted, a sleek sedan pulled up along the gravel driveway. Two uniformed inspectors emerged, clipboards in hand, and marched purposefully toward his coop. "Mr. Jordan," one said flatly, "we're here on behalf of the HOA to verify that your property conforms to our community standards." Sam met them at the door, his tone even and firm. "My chickens are a part of my heritage and my sustainable farming operation. I'm fully compliant with local regulations." Despite his calm explanation and the supporting documents he presented, the inspectors dutifully noted every detail. following Kerren's strict orders. Before long, Kerren herself arrived on the scene. Dressed immaculately, she surveyed the property with an air of unquestionable authority. "Sam, these rules are non-negotiable," she declared. "If you don't secure your coop immediately, you will face further penalties. The rules apply to everyone, and exceptions cannot be made." Her words stung, and as she turned and strode away, Sam's resolve hardened. That evening, as rain pattered softly on his window, Sam pored over his legal research. The fine wasn't about protecting the community. It was about imposing Kerren's narrow vision on every homeowner. Determined to safeguard his freedom, Sam vowed that he would document every instance of HOA overreach and prepare for the battle ahead. In the days that followed, Kerren's tactics escalated into a full-blown campaign of intimidation. What began with a single notice soon morphed into a series of fines and threats. Sam discovered multiple violation notices slapped onto his coop, fence, and even near the entrance of his property. Each notice cited a new infraction: excessive noise, improper animal containment, failure to maintain aesthetic property standards, all designed to portray his traditional, free-range farming methods as egregious mismanagement. Rumors started circulating among the neighbors. Several residents admitted they'd also received similar notices for relatively minor issues, and whispers emerged that Kerren was using the HOA funds to pursue personal vendettas rather than community improvement. One sympathetic board member discreetly tipped off Sam that fines were being arbitrarily imposed, and that certain funds were mysteriously disappearing when donations were made to the HOA. Realizing the scope of the problem, Sam took decisive action. He installed hidden security cameras around the coop and along the property lines to capture every unauthorized inspection and every piece of arbitrary signage. Over the next few days, he amassed a trove of damning footage. Inspectors arriving unannounced, taking measurements as if his farm were a public exhibition, and Kerren herself marching through the property with a smug smile, issuing threats. Each clip reinforced the fact that Kerren's campaign was not about maintaining order. It was about wielding power. Sam compiled all the evidence into a comprehensive dossier, complete with photographs, video clips, and written testimonies from neighbors who had experienced similar harassment. When the next HOA board meeting was announced, the tension in the community was palpable. Homeowners gathered in the packed meeting hall, clutching printed copies of Sam's dossier and murmuring in shared frustration. Taking the stage with quiet determination, Sam recounted the series of violations, from the initial fine to the onslaught of additional notices, and presented his evidence in a clear, methodical manner. The room grew silent as his presentation unfolded, with even some board members exchanging uneasy glances. What began as a personal dispute over his chickens had now morphed into a community-wide battle for the right to live freely and maintain one's property without arbitrary interference. By the end of the meeting, the seeds of rebellion were clearly planted. The community's collective voice was growing louder, and it was evident that if Kerren's abuses continued, decisive action would soon be inevitable. One cool, crisp morning, as Sam was making his rounds by the coop, he noticed a commotion on the dock. Kerren, determined to expand her control, had somehow arranged for a team of inspectors to board his property and inspect his farm animals. An outrageous move meant to further embarrass him. With a clipboard and a haughty demeanor, she directed her crew to scrutinize every feather and cluck, as if his chickens were merely decorative ornaments in a perfectly manicured garden. Fed up with the constant intrusion, Sam decided it was time to take a stand in the most inventive way possible. In his barn, he had recently upgraded his automated sprinkler system, a high-tech installation originally designed to keep his fields lush and conserve water. With a spark of defiance, Sam reprogrammed the system to serve as his counterattack. At the precise moment when Kerren and her entourage reached the coop, Sam activated the sprinklers. A deluge of water erupted from hidden nozzles, drenching the group and transforming the inspection into a scene of chaotic hilarity. Kerren's clipboard was soaked, her perfectly styled hair undone, and her carefully rehearsed inspection plan washed away in an instant. The onlookers, neighbors who had long grown tired of Kerren's overreach, erupted in cheers and laughter. Videos of the waterlogged inspection spread quickly on social media, and the image of a sputtering, drenched Kerren became an instant symbol of resistance. For Sam, the sprinkler strike was more than a moment of levity. It was a declaration that his property and his way of life would not be bullied by bureaucratic tyranny. The incident resonated deeply with the community. What had begun as an invasion of his private space had been repaid with ingenious, nonviolent defiance. Sam's act of turning water into his weapon galvanized other residents to question the legitimacy of Kerren's constant interventions. The battle lines were now drawn even more clearly. If the HOA sought to impose its will, the community would fight back with creativity and unity. Desperate to reassert her diminishing authority, Kerren resolved to escalate her tactics one final time. That evening, still fuming over the sprinkler debacle and the viral humiliation it had brought her, she picked up the phone and called the local police. In her call, Kerren falsely claimed that Sam's unruly management of his property had created a public disturbance, endangering the community's safety. It was a last-ditch effort to leverage law enforcement as a weapon against Sam's defiant independence. Within minutes, a police patrol arrived at Jordan Acres. The officers, maintaining their professional detachment, met Sam calmly at his front door. Sam, ever composed, produced copies of permits, zoning documents, and records of his previous communications with the HOA, all of which demonstrated that his farming practices were entirely legal. The officers examined the evidence, complimented the efficiency of his automated systems, and ultimately dismissed Kerren's baseless complaint. Not willing to accept defeat, Kerren then secretly hired a private investigator to dig up incriminating evidence against Sam. Late that night, while most of the community slept, the PI attempted to sneak onto Sam's property. However, Sam's well-placed security cameras captured every moment. The footage clearly showed the PI triggering alarms and trespassing, actions that violated Sam's privacy and property rights. At the next HOA meeting, with the entire community gathered, Sam took the stage once more. With calm resolve, he played the incriminating footage on a large screen. This evidence, he announced, proves that Kerren's desperate actions have crossed the line into criminal trespass. Instead of protecting our community, she's been abusing her power for personal vendettas. The room fell silent as gasps and murmurs of approval filled the air. Kerren attempted to defend herself with weak excuses about maintaining order, but the overwhelming evidence left no room for doubt. Later that day, under mounting pressure from local authorities, Kerren was issued a trespassing citation, a final, decisive blow to her credibility. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Kerren's final, desperate move had backfired catastrophically. Her attempt to weaponize the police and private investigators against Sam had only exposed her true nature. The community's support for Sam and his right to independent property management had never been stronger, and Kerren's days as the HOA enforcer were now numbered. In the aftermath of Kerren's humiliation and her disastrous final move, the community's long-held frustration finally erupted into organized rebellion. An emergency town hall meeting was convened at the local community center, a stark fluorescent-lit room that, on that day, became the battleground for the residents' revolt against arbitrary authority. Frustrated homeowners, tired of being bullied by Kerren's relentless fines and invasive inspections, gathered in large numbers, armed with copies of Sam's comprehensive dossier. Photographs, video recordings, and personal testimonies documenting every instance of her overreach. One by one, residents recounted their experiences of being harassed and fined for trivial deviations from Kerren's strict standards. The collective anger in the room was palpable, a resounding chorus demanding that enough was enough. After hours of impassioned debate, the community voted unanimously to dissolve the current HOA board and remove Kerren from her position as president. The decision was swift and decisive, a clear rejection of the tyrannical control that had long stifled their individuality. Local media quickly picked up the story, heralding it as the fall of the HOA tyrant, while city officials launched an independent investigation into the board's financial practices. It soon emerged that funds had been misappropriated to support Kerren's personal vendettas, and countless fines had been issued solely to intimidate homeowners who dared to live freely. The legal fallout was swift. Heavy fines were imposed on former board members, and several individuals faced criminal charges for fraud and mismanagement. For Sam, the collapse of the HOA was both a personal vindication and a communal triumph. Sitting on his porch one crisp morning, he sipped his coffee as the sun rose over his reclaimed property, a property now free from the oppressive dictates of Kerren's regime. Across the neighborhood, the dark shadow of bureaucratic tyranny had lifted, replaced by a vibrant spirit of unity and self-determination. Following the community's decisive vote and the dramatic collapse of the corrupt HOA board, the full weight of the law was brought to bear on the miscreants. City inspectors and independent auditors began a thorough review of the board's financial records and enforcement practices. Their investigation uncovered a tangled web of misappropriated funds and baseless fines that had been imposed to serve Kerren's personal agenda. Money meant for community improvements had been diverted, and fines were levied without any just cause. Armed with overwhelming evidence, a coalition of affected homeowners, led by Sam, filed a class action lawsuit against the former board. In a series of public hearings, Sam presented his meticulously compiled dossier: video footage of intrusive inspections, photographs of absurd violation notices, and internal communications exposing the board's systematic abuse of power. The courtroom became a stage for the community's collective voice, and the judge's verdict was swift and unequivocal. Heavy fines were imposed on the board members. Several individuals faced criminal charges for fraud and mismanagement, and all misappropriated funds were ordered to be redirected toward community development projects. Additionally, the settlement mandated that a new, democratically elected board be established to govern transparently in the future. Local headlines soon blared "Fall of the HOA Tyrants," and the case quickly became a beacon of hope for communities resisting arbitrary authority. For Sam and his neighbors, the legal victory was not merely about financial restitution. It was a powerful reclamation of their autonomy and a clear declaration that no one is above the law. With the legal verdict and public humiliation now in full effect, Kerren's personal world began to crumble. Once the imposing enforcer of the HOA's draconian rules, she was now exposed as a petty, overreaching bully whose actions had brought shame not only to herself but to the entire board. Forced to resign from her position as president, Kerren found herself isolated. Former allies and board members distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with her tarnished legacy. Her stately home, a symbol of the suburban status she so desperately clung to, was swiftly put on the market amid swirling rumors of financial ruin, and whispers spread that her longtime partner had abandoned her, unable to bear the relentless pressure and public disgrace. Her attempts to secure even a modest role in property management were met with derision. At local job fairs, potential employers exchanged skeptical glances whenever her name was mentioned, and the community's scorn was palpable. In one particularly humiliating moment at a city hall meeting, Kerren desperately tried to justify her actions as necessary measures for maintaining order, but her feeble explanations were met with laughter and pointed remarks from the assembled residents. Kerren's personal downfall became a living cautionary tale, a stark reminder that abuse of power will eventually be exposed and punished. For Sam, witnessing Kerren's collapse was a quiet, deeply satisfying moment of poetic justice. There was no need for overt celebration. Every public misstep, every financial setback, and every whispered comment reinforced the truth that no one, not even a self-styled enforcer, is above accountability. Kerren's personal ruin became a symbol of the inevitable collapse of tyranny when faced with a united community determined to live freely. As autumn deepened into a crisp, clear evening, the community of Carter Acres settled into a new era of freedom and unity. The dark days of arbitrary fines, invasive inspections, and oppressive HOA mandates were now merely a cautionary tale, a chapter that had finally been closed. Sam sat on his porch, the warm glow of the setting sun reflecting off his property, and the gentle sounds of nature replacing the echoes of past turmoil. At a celebratory block party held in the community park, Neighbors gathered to toast their hard-won victory over bureaucratic tyranny. Laughter and lively conversation filled the air as residents recounted humorous anecdotes of their struggles, especially the day when Kerren, attempting her usual inspection routine, was caught red-handed on Sam's security cameras while trying to steal his mailbox yet again. In one particularly memorable moment, a longtime friend produced a comically oversized HOA violation notice accusing Sam of excessive mailbox vigilance and unauthorized federal theft. With a wry smile, Sam accepted the faux citation and quipped, "I guess they really did try." The crowd erupted in laughter and applause, a final, resounding mic drop on the era of oppression. As twilight deepened and the party wound down, families and friends lingered together, sharing hopes for a future built on transparency, innovation, and mutual respect. The oppressive rules that once loomed over Carter Acres had been replaced by a community-led governance system that celebrated individuality and safeguarded personal rights. Sitting quietly on his porch, Sam reflected on the long, hard-fought battle. His mailbox, stolen repeatedly by an overzealous, tyrannical Kerren, had finally been restored thanks to his vigilant security system and subsequent legal action. The legacy of HOA Kerren's reign of petty control had been consigned to a cautionary tale, and the united spirit of the community shone brighter than ever. Fade to black.